the bottom go live.
Yes.
I suppose the one on the top that I was doing for 45 minutes.
Well,
It says done redirecting to your Facebook page.
It says live on Facebook. There
Yeah.
we go.
Okay.
So
It said that on Saturday, the lying sack of
yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I did get a MWA NorCal chapter is live. So I think it actually worked. We are live, and I will go ahead and resume recording. Lori, are you ready?
You go ahead.
We go.
Yep. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? We're not taking questions, right?
You can.
We are taking questions.
Yeah, Lori will feed them to you if you want.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah. So welcome to night 3 of Mystery Week, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, an annual celebration of crime writing from the NorCal chapter of Mystery Writers of America, which has been empowering mystery writers and encouraging mystery readers since 1945. I am Lori King. I am the current president of the NorCal chapter. And I would like to encourage you to join us both in our many events that we have open to the public, some of which are here on Facebook and some of which are elsewhere, and in becoming a member. Take a look at our website, which is mwanorcal.org. And there you can find a list of upcoming events and our members and member benefits and all that. And if you watch our Facebook page for a series of live talks and panels, you will find more of us this week and later. Tonight's panel, Where's My Hero? Finding characters who work for you. The moderator tonight is Claire Johnson, who is a board member of MWA NorCal. She book is a Jane Austen pastiche called Resolution, just out, and I highly recommend it. So thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions, do put them into the chat. You can open up the chat on the bottom of your screen. If you type them in all caps, we are more likely to see them. But feel free to chat as you go or to ask questions and ask questions afterwards. And generally speaking, we leave the screen open after the event for you to come up, live your cameras, and you can have a chat with our authors if you like. So I will make no further ado. Thank you, Claire and the rest, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Lori. As Lori said, I'm Claire Johnson. I've also written a couple of mysteries, but we're not here to talk about me. So let me introduce our panel. David Corbett has written several novels. Marilyn Stasio, the critic for the New York Times, said David Corbett, for all the lyricism of his narration and in the compassion he shows his characters, Corbett never strays too far from the blunt vigor of California noir. His books include 6 works of fiction: The Devil's Redhead, Done for a Dime, Blood of Paradise, Do They Know I'm Running, The Mercy of the Night, The Devil Prayed and Darkness Fell, and a real departure here, The Long Lost Love Letters of Doc Holliday. He's also written numerous short stories and 2 nonfiction books on developing character, The Art of Character, and his latest just out, The Compass of Character. As I said to him earlier today, given his background, this is a little bit like bringing coals to Newcastle, but we soldier on. He's been nominated for numerous awards, and he's a fabulous writer. So Camille Menechino, I suffered whiplash today trying to keep straight the number of personas that Camille has adopted for her Cozy Mystery series. Writing under her real name in the periodic table mysteries and the Professor Sophie Knowles mystery, featuring a math professor at a New England college. Then we have her writing as Margaret Grace in the miniature mysteries. I don't think this woman ever sleeps. And you should see her dollhouse. To writing as Jean Flowers, the postmistress in a Western Massachusetts town. And finally, possibly my favorite of all, as Elizabeth Logan, set in a diner in Alaska with Charlie Cook as her protagonist, who owns a cat. Camille, then you realize how hysterical this entire concept is. As is the visual of her cooking. She's won 2 awards, the Jack London Award from the California Writers Club and Excellence in Editing Awards from the Society of Technical Communication. She also has a PhD in physics. Ann Parker. Ann Parker is the
As
master.
a minor afterthought. Oh, she has a PhD
Yeah,
in physics. Yes,
in her spare time. Anne is the master of the lyrical sentence. She is the author of the Silver Rush Mystery Series, featuring Inez Stannard, very loosely based on her grandmother, who grew up in Leadville, Colorado. She's recently moved her heroine, Inez, from her saloon, the Silver Queen in Leadville, broke my heart, to San Francisco. I'm very much looking forward to reading her latest book, number 7, featuring Inez, Mortal Music. She is the winner of the SIPA, is that right, Anne? SIPA Evie Silver Award for Mystery Crime Fiction, Detective Fiction. And to quote Mystery Scene magazine, the author has created a wonderful picture of 1980s San Francisco, partially Wild West, partially a cultural outpost. And finally, we have Eileen, 1880s. Finally, we have Eileen Riddell. She's another one of these amazing people who writes in several genres. From chick lit to urban fantasy to thriller to the cozy mystery, she's tackled them all. Like Camille, she has a host of pseudonyms. She is the author of the Messenger series and chick lit novels, along with her numerous alter egos, Eileen Carr, who writes romantic suspense. Her other alter ego, Christy Abbott and Lillian Bell, write cozy mysteries. She's been a finalist for a number of prestigious awards, including the Rita from Romance Writers of America. She's won the Lorix Award, the Beacon Award, and the National Reader's Choice Award. So we have, a panel of heavy hitters here. So as Lori said, we are talking about basically where's my hero? And I'm going to start off with David. David, can you define what is a hero to you?
Really, no.
Okay.
And I was looking at the questions you submitted to us, and I kind of went, I don't know. Basically, I mean, when I'm teaching, what I say is that the protagonist is the character who is either the one who's most compelled to act, the one who carries the moral premise of the story, the one who inspires the most empathy from the reader, or who has the coolest name. And I don't remember what the fourth one is. But I mean, there's a number of things where, I think that especially for a lot of beginning writers, choosing the protagonist can be a little problematic. They go, well, I've got this big story and it's actually a 2-person story. And I always, as a teacher, I'm always going, really? It's not. It's a 1-person story. You just haven't figured out what your real story is yet. And so the protagonist is normally the person with whom we want the reader to see the story in their eyes, want to see the story through their perspective. And as a result, there's nothing which absolutely defines a hero. It is whoever you decide is the best person to see the story proceed.
Well, I think that in the cozy genre, of which Eileen and Camille are the stars here, I was thinking about this today, that, many people in a cozy mystery, they're not necessarily heroes. You have Miss Marple in the garden, planting, moving pansies around. And you would definitely say that she is the hero in the Miss Marple mysteries. But do either of you agree with me that really part of the attraction for cozy mysteries is the fact that we could see ourselves in these characters? And we might not see ourselves as heroes necessarily, and I think in the way that David is talking about, but it's an ordinary person who maybe does an extraordinary thing. And that's why I think that cozies have such longevity and power over mystery readers. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, especially about the everyday person, the ordinary person put into extraordinary circumstances. But I think there's also an element of the person who's willing to sacrifice something of themselves for other people. Mm-hmm. Usually the cozy mystery protagonist is getting involved in a crime because someone they love has been accused of it, or someone they care about was the victim. They put themselves out there for someone else. And I think that's what David was saying about carrying like the moral core of the story. I think it has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I agree. And also sometimes we see, just speaking for Cozy again, that this person will do things we're not brave enough to do. So, you know, even though sometimes it's the too stupid to live syndrome and they go into a, you know, a parking garage late at night all alone. We try not to do that, or I do anyway. But in general, they do things that put themselves in danger for the sake of solving the mystery, helping someone else. So in that sense, maybe a heroine. And we see, at least for me, you see yourself not willing to do that, so she's a hero. And I'm sorry, David, you were going to.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I do believe that there's very often when you're choosing who the hero is, you're choosing between selfless and selfish.
Uh-huh.
And the hero is the one who's almost always trying to do something on behalf of someone else. There's a moral vision that incorporates someone besides himself. And very often what we think of as villainy is self-interest taken to a pathological extreme.
Mhm.
Not
And
that there's a president we could name that would respond to that, but I'm just putting that out there.
And you are our historical novelist representative here. Do you believe that place or history is a character? I mean, I certainly felt that way about reading your Leadville novels, that Leadville becomes a character after a certain point in the series. Do you believe that?
Well, you know, I think so, because places have different feels to them, and they, you know, different environment, and how people react to them is different depending if you're riding the range. Sorry, there is a cat in here. Can I get her
Oh,
out?
Camille.
Boy. But
What?
you know, what? But you know, if it's a 19th century city versus, I don't know, if it's London versus San Francisco versus Denver, you know, it should come across as different. So, you know, yeah.
But I mean, certainly in your novels, in this standard, I mean, she's limited, and you know, her story is unique because of Leadville, right? I mean, the Silver Rush is it was a unique time in history where certainly there were other rushes, but in terms of her story, the Leadville part of it is very, very unique.
Mhm.
Well, I think so, you know,
Very.
but I have a soft spot in my heart for Leadville.
I know, I know.
And, you know, the Silver Rush in Nevada was different, and the Gold Rush in California, although they all, as you say, incorporate similar elements.
Yeah. So can a villain be heroic?
Well, in their own minds, generally. I mean, when you're trying to build a villain, usually they're the hero of their own stories. They have their reasons for doing stuff that makes total sense to them. But oftentimes, like David said, it's selfish as opposed to selfless. Well, I guess not always, but yeah, there's that moment where you have to realize like every character in the book is the hero of their own story, and you have to
Right.
like proceed that way. They all have their goals and and the things that get in their way.
You know, when David said something that really resonated when he talked about when you teach, and some student is always going to say, oh, I have 3 protagonists. And you say, no, you really don't. You just haven't figured out the one protagonist yet. But, you know, it's the same, I think, with the villain. Like, I think of Dexter, and truly a unique character. Is he a hero or a villain? He certainly has these heroic aspects in that he really researches. He doesn't just willy-nilly go out and kill. He researches a whole plan, and his victim has to be a serial killer that he is removing from the world. So Dexter is one of those sort of in between, or he does double duty for me. I miss Dexter. I heard he's coming back.
He's coming back. He's coming back.
Not
They're
too
gonna
early.
fix that ending. Oh my God.
I know he comes out of the cold, so to speak.
You
Well,
know,
I think of someone like, I mean, Snape in Harry Potter, who is, uh, your worst nightmare as a teacher. But the where he does play, he plays this. It's a redemption arc. So in some ways, he's a hero, but he's obviously also a villain. I mean, he's responsible for Harry's parents' death, essentially. So
But that provides a great example that we can all learn from, which is when a villain has an arc, a redemptive arc, that's amazing. And because so often, I remember I heard somebody on a panel once say, well, no, the villain never changes. I go, nonsense,
No.
nonsense.
oh,
And in fact, they become far more fascinating if they have that capacity for insight and change. And but the thing that defines them as a villain is that whatever their goal is, it's opposite and equal to the heroes. Only one of them can win. And that's what creates the unity of opposites, as Lajos had recalled it. And as long as you have that and you motivate it well on both sides, you get close to what Oakley Hall said was always the best drama, which is good versus good. I mean, if you can really inhabit, the villain's point of view and see it as a moral vision in which he truly believes he's achieving the best world he believes in. I mean, the most cartoonish villain in the world is the Joker, but he sees himself as an agent of chaos.
Right.
And the thing about chaos, he says, chaos is fair.
yeah. Yeah, Sid, one book that is very disturbing but beautiful, and I will never read it again, is Perfume by Patrick Susskind, where the protagonist is so repulsive, and he steals his perfume, and it basically destroys him. And it was just fascinating because he has that dual role where he's both the hero and the villain. And it makes for compelling reading because a character like that, you can't predict. Unlike, say, someone like Voldemort, where you can predict that whatever he's going to do is going to be horrible and evil. But a villain who has a dual, especially one with a redemption arc, is it keeps you guessing. And isn't that what we want in all our books? We want to keep guessing what's going to happen next. We don't want to turn the page and have what we expect to happen. That just becomes boring, and then we're not going to turn the pages anymore.
That's the great reader's paradox. Stephen James talks about this. He says that readers always want to be able to predict what's going to happen, and they always want to be wrong.
Yeah. True. Very true. So my next question is, do you feel that there's a difference in building character arcs for standalone versus a series? Anne, what about you? How do you feel?
well, I really haven't written a standalone, so I am probably not the right person to ask.
But you have this issue where you have to carry a character arc throughout. You're on book 7 now. You have to provide something that's fresh and unique, for every single book. So
Right, yeah.
you don't have the luxury of packing everything in a 400-page book.
Right. Yeah. So it's like little hops,
Right.
you're like this, and where you want the reader to be satisfied at the end, you always want to leave the door open for more development or movement forward,
Right.
down or sideways for the protagonist. So, but I mean, someone who's written standalone could probably answer that one a little bit better. It's always a struggle when you're writing a series. I mean,
Well, that's the point. Go ahead, Ann. What is the struggle? What do you?
well, it's like you revisit an old friend and say, "Hi, old friend. Okay, let's see what new has happened in your life." And in some ways, the character pretty well, but you want to be able to at the same time find something new to present them with and provide a certain momentum to the character for that story. And I mean, some people do it with plot. I mean, you asked that question, Claire, and I was thinking, well, what I do is I tend to introduce new characters into the mix. Somebody walks in my mind, oh, hi, come on in. Let's see what havoc or what fun you can bring.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then your protagonist is sitting there, who is this person? What are they going to do? And how they interact, how those different characters interact with your protagonist can often bring out new aspects to your, you know, main character.
And
and
it's-
other-
it is book 8 for Anne, just to, you know.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's
I'm
okay.
a numbers girl. I like to have the numbers straight.
It's due November 1st. So if I'm still sitting here
Oh.
sort like this, you'll understand.
You know, so I have one standalone, and what distresses me about it is that everyone wants me to write another one, and I keep saying, no, can't you tell this is over? Can't you tell this is finished? I can't write another one. I said everything in this one. So that means essentially I kind of failed my standalone task there.
No, you made them fall in love with the characters so
Yeah,
much that they want to
Oh.
revisit them.
Yeah, we should all fail. We should all
We
fail.
all fail.
Yeah. There's 20 books plus. So Eileen, you've written both cozies and standalones, yes?
Mhm.
So what is your perspective on this?
I thought Anne actually was really summing up beautifully. I mean, when you're writing a series, I mean, a lot of times you've got a character that's got some of the same, you know, a core issue that you can revisit in a few different ways. Like they have trust issues, and maybe that trust issues comes out in like whether they can trust a friend or a lover or a parent, or, you know, so you can keep revisiting that in different ways in different books. For the standalones, I'm like Camille, it's like, nope, here's the nice little ball. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely wrapped up in that with a little bow, but I like to be able to see them at least on that path to there. And I feel like their story's done. They've resolved their issue. They're not going to keep coming back to it in different ways.
Yeah.
And I
So
think sometimes-
David, you're the king of standalones. So how do you feel about this? Have you ever thought about writing a series?
I'm actually working on a series, but it's such a weird series. It just is completely, you know, I have a character who's immortal, you know, and who just, what I love is that the idea of a traveling angel, and it's a term for characters like Reacher, Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, but also Mary Poppins. And there's a Japanese character named Toro-san, who's a itinerant merchant who just kind of bumbles into these little domestic problems and tries to help people and has visions of greatness, but he's really just a little schlub, you know. But the traveling angel is somebody who just goes from episode to episode, sees a problem, does what he can to fix it, and then moves on. And I thought, well, what if it was kind of like an angel? But so I just chose a character from Celtic myth, and I changed his real story, and he lives and dies, spends a little time in the other world with his wife, Neve with the golden hair. He's Oisin, Finn McCool's son. He's a great poet and warrior of the Fianna cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And then he comes back. You know, he's cursed because well, no, I won't get into the story. But anyway, I mean, so I'm doing a series, and it's sort of a, not urban fantasy, but it's sort of a dystopian, he's in the near future of America. But he has the perspective of history of 2,500 years of seeing what's happening in America, not just through the eyes of all that history, but also Irish history. It's sort of like the Troubles writ large. So, and what you have to do, what I found what I have to do is create him with a completely unique standalone arc to make the story interesting. That's just my take on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the book, there is a completely unique problem he has, not just in the real world, but the other world that he somehow has to solve. But I'd like to, as far as talking about the traveling angel motif, you've got someone like Reacher, who is a true traveling angel. I mean, he comes into town, figures out what's wrong, kicks shit.
High noon.
That's it. High noon. Yeah, boom, and then he's on. You know, and you know that once he gets off the bus, he's never getting back on. Just, well, you know, that's not my problem. It's just never gonna happen.
Yeah.
But somebody like Matt Scudder or Harry Bosch is a different kettle of fish.
Totally different, totally different.
They really do have an arc. And I mean, and Michael really spent a lot of time with Bosch to create that, you know, and what happens when he finally figures out who kills his mother? Well, takes a very dark turn. We realize it was other cops who protected the killer.
That was a beautiful book.
It is.
That was a great book.
I know.
Great book.
And then suddenly, you know, Michael realized, well, I got to get him out of this dark place. I'll give him a daughter. Boom, you know, and that was a whole new change.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so it really does depend. If you want your series to be episodic in the sense of a traveling angel, that's fine. It's a really well-established genre. It has great legs. But if you also want to create your series where you actually have a character who grows through the course of the series and changes, that too is allowed. Dennis Lehane once said something that I think was a little unfair. And he just said, have you ever heard anybody ever say that the 17th book in the series was their favorite? And he meant it as a joke. And yet I opened the 49th book in the 87th Precinct series by Ed McBain.
Oh.
And it was great. I mean, it was the first book I read. And I kind of went, how did he do this? So,
I don't know.
Me neither. I mean, he's just, but the truth matters, you just have to figure out, if I'm going to write a series, do I want it to be episodic or do I want to create an arc? And if you're going to create an arc, then every book has to be a step in that process.
Right. Well, I do think that the thing about Harry Bosch is that he's a loner. So you have all these different avenues he can go because, you know, he's not married and he lives his job. And so, you know, there's an embarrassment of riches there to take him someplace. So that also works. I mean, in some ways, he's not the traveling angel, but he is the loner. He just stays in LA as opposed to Jack Reacher, who.
Well, as opposed to going place to place, he goes situation to situation.
Yeah.
A traveling angel can exist in one geographical locale.
Well, just interesting aside, David, in that I took a bunch of Celtic literature classes in college. And one thing that was so confusing was that the Irish myths, death just doesn't exist. They keep, all these people who die keep coming back into the myth, you know, into different myths, and they play different roles. They just don't die. They just kind of come back. And and it was very confusing as a student trying to figure this out. But wait a minute, that guy died, 200 years ago. But anyway, so.
If you're looking for logic in Celtic myth,
I know, it's totally illogical. So how much backstory do you provide? I mean, how much? I mean, I was reading something by Donald Moss, and he basically said nobody wants backstory anymore.
Oh.
I don't think that's true, but what do people think?
It's not even true. It's not even true of what Don says about.
I know. Well, yeah, I know. But I was thinking about that because I do think that the pace of the novel has changed, and that books that did really well 25 years ago would be seen as unbearably slow today. And is that because the backstory has been sort of edited out to a certain extent? These books, I think, would be perceived of as slow. And even Edgar winners, I look at Edgar winners from 25 years ago and I would say, no, they wouldn't get an award today.
Except Claire, I don't know what you've been reading recently, but the last 3 that I will not name by authors you would expect, they're my go-to authors. I'm done with reading manuscripts and I'm done with writing manuscript for a week. And I have these go-to authors I can always count on for a good story. Not anymore.
I agree.
Privately, I'll, if you want. But I've gotten these dumps reading along, and there's a scene that is tense, and you are looking forward to seeing what happens. And the next thing you know, for 3 pages, you've got backstory. Well, here's how Mr. X got to this point, and it's a dump. And it's happening over and over, and these are brand new books. So I wish it weren't the thing these days. Just a thought.
Well, don't you think that that's just bad writing as opposed to, because there is a way to salt in backstory. That is someone who had 4 months to write a book. And yeah, I agree with you because I just finished one and I'm like, I just wasted $25.
Yes.
I bought it in hardcover.
Yes.
And yeah. Anyway, Eileen, do you want to
Well,
chime in?
I think I have to know. I have to know what their backstory is. Have to know how they became who they are. And I think when I know that, the little bits of information that the reader needs along the way can get, as you said, sort of salted in as it's
Yeah.
needed. But I don't want any more than that in there. Just
Right.
what they need when they need it. But that doesn't mean that I don't have like their whole life mapped out for me.
Yeah, I mean, Anne, you've got a lot of, if you've got book 8, that, you've got a lot of backstory there, and your backstory feeds into your current story. So how do you not be repetitive and bore readers who have been following you all along, and yet, our new reader who sees the cover and says, wow, that looks cool. So how do you salt all that in? Because there's and Ez has a lot of history. There's a lot of history.
She does. And it's all kind of, I mean, forget the history that happens before the series. Just, she's had a rough couple of years.
She has.
This doesn't stop for her.
Yeah.
Well, I try to put it into places that make sense. Like, certainly not when someone's chasing her down the street or whatever, but if she's just gathered the mail for the day and there's a letter from her sister back east with, a picture of the son that is now living with her sister, that'll give me just a little opening where I can sort of say, oh yes, she has a son, but son doesn't live with her, and I don't go into the whole messy story, just at least let she still cares about him and she's glad he's where he is because it's the right place, and and then move on. But sometimes I often veer one way or another. I either don't say anything, and my critique partners at the end of 30 chapters are saying, she doesn't think about her son this whole time. But she's got this other kid here, a child kind of, oh, well, I got to find that little window to kind of,
Yeah.
he has a
Yeah.
son. Or else I go on for a couple pages and it's like, my critique partners say, why? And I go, oh, well, I don't know. Chop.
Yeah.
It's nice to have other
Yeah.
sets.
Miss 200,000 words. Yes, we've been there. Yeah. So David, what about you? And you've got I would say your protagonists are, a lot of their backstory is essentially tragedy. And so, we have to know it. We have to know what makes them make these choices, whether these choices are good or they have no choice. So how much do you incorporate? A
Well,
lot?
I have a little thing on my computer, which is backstory is behavior.
Is what?
Backstory is behavior. The way you present
That's great. That's
backstory
great.
is how they behave. And you make it so it's a little baffling. Why is he, the example I use very often when I'm teaching is Rick Blaine from Casablanca. We got this guy in a tux, but he's really rude to this girl who's clearly in love with him. He watches Ugarte die. And somebody says, when they come for me, I hope you don't stand there. And he says, I stick my neck out for nobody. But his staff love him clearly. And he's Bogart. So he's, and you want to go, what stitches all this together? And of course, we don't find out till the middle of the movie. And James Scott Bell has a whole writing book on write your book from the middle, which is what he calls the mirror scene, when the character examines his life in a way that sort of explains what we haven't had explained yet and where he's going to go, like in the middle of Chinatown.
Right.
Jake and Evelyn, you finally have sex, and he's doing what a guy does, which is smoking a cigarette, hoping to go to sleep. And she's doing, what women do, which is like, who are you? I'm asking questions, so what did you do? Where did you come from? And that's when we find out about the whole thing in Chinatown. We've heard glimpses. We've heard about Chinatown before, and you leave little crumbs there, but you leave it to a point where it's necessary or where it really works in an important way. And it very often can wait till the middle of the book, which is where you're either going to have a big reversal or a big reveal, and the character is going to be kind of going, well, what am I doing here?
Right.
Very often that, it's their backstory that will inform how they interpret that.
Well,
So to
don't you think,
build
don't you
that,
think,
you want to embed it in how they behave, how they think, how they react to people, and so on and so forth. If you can do that, the backstory will just basically take care of itself up until then.
well, I've often thought that part of what makes a good novel, and I do think that we just have a nation of ADD readers, and that they want things, you really cannot, you can't leave a book to meander or even create atmosphere. You've got to have basically the body by page 3 sort of thing. People want it fast. They don't have the attention span, but a well-written book will carry you over those humps where it will sort of, in my opinion, will defeat the sort of our ADD approach to everything these days, where we have to have it now. And that is, I think that's a sign of a really good writer, where the crumbs are tasty enough that our very short attention spans will carry us to that next piece of cupcake, and then the next and then until we have the reveal, and then it's kind of like an aha. But I think it's very difficult to achieve, because I think in these days that readers, they want it all, and they want it now. I mean,
Well,
does anyone?
Girl on a Train, though, is a great example, again, of,
Yeah.
backstory behavior. We see her on this train going, what is going on with this woman?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's, and that secret that explains it is, that the thing is, when you've got a big secret, you hold it and as long as you can until it's finally revealed. And that secret is almost always the core of the backstory.
Right. Well, I do think that there seems to be a new trend. I don't know if you guys agree with me, but there seems to be a new trend with very dislikable protagonists, and Girl on a Train is an example of that, where we don't like these people. And when I see criticisms in Amazon, that seems to be the number one thing. I don't like this person. I didn't finish it because I didn't like this person. Although some of these books, like the Girl on a Train, the protagonist was fascinating, and so that carried us to the reveal. But this seems, and Gone Girl, I mean, this woman's repulsive, right? And yet, and that seems to be a trope these days, where I pick up a book and there's someone who is not very likable, and I think it creates it's harder for the novelist in some ways, because then they have to keep us rooted to our seat. Does anyone feel the same way, that there seems to be a new genre of unlikable
I think we might be
protagonists?
on the downward slope of it. I think there was quite a bit, and I think we may have crested that wave.
Oh, good.
But
Mhm.
and we all have our different definitions of what's likable.
Right. True.
There was a
True.
book a few years ago where somebody, now I'm going to forget the name of it. I think it was The Woman Next Door, The Woman at the End of the Hall, something like that.
Woman in the Window?
The one in the
No, that's a different, that's a whole nother thing. This wasn't,
Very
But
much so. Yeah.
but someone asked the author about writing an unlikable heroine, and she walked out of the interview, and I read the book, and she wasn't unlikable. There was, so to me, so obviously other people were saying things. I found everything that she was doing was completely well motivated. I understood it. She wasn't a mean person or anything, but somehow other people found her unlikable. So I think some of it's in our own perception.
In our perception. What do you think, Camille?
Well, I'm trying to figure out which book Eileen means.
Yeah, let me
A.J.
Google.
Flynn. Do you mean the A.J. Flynn book, The Woman in the Window?
No.
Woman in Cabin 10?
Mm-mm.
Mm.
Yeah, but
You guys keep
anyway,
talking. I'm going to Google.
I did like Woman in the Window. I thought that was almost the perfect way of keeping us guessing. We didn't love her. We didn't wish we were her, but we understood all the challenges she was facing. And so to me, that worked. But even the other ones that you sort of alluded to, Claire, that are the ADD class or whatever. The point is, it's almost too late. They don't like it, but they've already bought it. So it's number one.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we're dealing with. This book gets to be number one, even though the review says, we didn't like this character. And now, of course, we're into a whole other realm of the industry or what makes a bestseller and how that carries out. And that's maybe you don't want to go there. So
Well, I find it inexplicable. I mean, there's certain books I just think, wow, there's some black magic here. And then there's other books that I loved and didn't get much notice, so I don't know. I'm not the poster child for what makes a good book or a bad book. It seems like alchemy to me. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, I understand why books by someone like Charles O'Reilly or the idiot on Fox. I mean, the Republicans bought up a bunch of his books and then he got on a bestseller list. I mean, so Bill O'Reilly. And so, but other books.
Not fiction. Yeah. Did he write fiction? He didn't write fiction, did he?
Yeah.
I mean, regular fiction, not, political fiction. Yeah. I'll stop there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it. So what role do secondary characters play in your books? Do they have a defined role in contrasting and enlightening your protagonist development? Or are they used as kind of a impartial mirror or even a biased mirror where you could,
I was waiting for you to get to that, really, because this is my backdrop, and I was going to offer a prize to the person who figured out whose wedding this is.
Oh, it's obvious. There's James Caan.
Right. There's a book that spawned 3 movies, but every character in that book adds to the story, to the plot, and throws light on whoever you want to call the main character, the godfather, who of course goes from one to the other. And to me, that's the ideal way to do it. Each one contributes to the story. They're not just the waiter who drops a little, steak fries on your plate and leaves, and you give him a little tick so you'll remember him. These are characters that have so much backstory that is revealed through a line of dialogue.
Right. Yeah. The dialogue is amazing.
How many lines of dialogue do you remember from that first book, or the only book really that the movies are based on? So secondary characters like that are, to me, the ideal people. You just say the name, or you see the wedding, and it looks like there's a bride, there's a groom, there's Diane Keaton in a big hat. But that scene that starts everything from that one scene, with all those people who show up eventually and take on a life of their own. And just one more brief thing. At one time in one of my recent houses, there have been that many, but I had that photo in a frame in the front hall. So as you came in, you saw
Really?
that. And everyone would say, who's wedding? Is that your sister? That's not you? And then finally, for most of them, it would dawn on them whose wedding it was. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Truly, truly amazing. But I also do think that there's a historical art there, and there's so much subtle foreshadowing that where it literally could be just a sentence, a look, and then when it happens, we nod, we say yeah.
And how many crime dramas on TV do you say, that's from the guy, oh, they bring me back in, or my family? I mean, so many of these little devices that show up on TV crime dramas, and you want to say, oh, come on,
You know what? This is true. This is a true story. The YA that I'm writing, I just finished a chapter where one of the characters says, go to the mattresses.
Well, I'll excuse you, Claire.
All right. It works. Does anybody have anything else to say about secondary characters?
I just
I
wanted to
think
see
that
the
what Camille said
Godfather
is-
again.
What?
Go ahead, Anne.
Go ahead.
Anne, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, after that little conversation, I want to see The Godfather again. I
Yes.
haven't seen
Yeah.
it in a decade or more.
One of the things that Camille brings up is that how many stories you know start out with a wedding, a funeral, or some other celebration. Why? Because everybody's there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Michael, we see that wedding scene largely through Michael's eyes, who's saying, "This is my family. This isn't me, Kay." And of course, we realize that's going to turn. We talk about foreshadowing. I mean, it's the scene is brilliant, but the movie is so much better than the book.
Yeah.
Well,
As far as secondary characters, again, I'm going to return to Chinatown, and I'm sorry, but Jake has two subordinates, Walsh and Duffy, and they're two sides of him. There's the
Yes.
word in Walsh, the careful guy, but who isn't terribly bright, and then there's Duffy, who's the impulsive guy, who's the joker. And so that what they've done is use the secondary characters to kind of flesh out different aspects. Just as the two bad guys, Mulvihill and the midget, who's really Roman Polanski. The one's a dandy, so this whole notion of upwardly mobile, and the other one's just kind of a lout. And when you see Noah Cross, he puts on this folksy veneer, so you can kind of see Mulvihill as one half, but then also I'm the guy of privilege. I'm the guy who people look up to. And so very often, if you want to, you can use your secondary characters as the word you used was mirrors, as partial mirrors or distorting mirrors of your
Yeah.
main character.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it can be both at the same time, and I do think that, even though we have a protagonist, obviously, and I do agree with you that every book has one protagonist, but how these secondary characters work, I think, is key to a fuller novel.
Absolutely.
So let's see, what else do we got here? Okay. Oh, this is interesting. It's not, it sort of is tangential to characters. I just finished a book by an author, really very extremely well regarded mystery author. And I found that the voice was flat, and I did not feel that the protagonist was well fleshed out. I didn't understand him by the end of the book, even though the book was hundreds of pages. And what was different was that this book was written in third person point of view, as opposed to the other books, and sort of, not really a series, but sort of a series, which were lots of revolving characters, but were written in first person point of view with really distinctive voices that blew me away. This book, the third person point of view, and I mean, I might write in first person, but I like all different kinds of point of view. I'm not religious about one or the other. So I'm curious whether, do you feel that writing in different points of view affects how your character feels to you? Do you feel closer to an I, or do you not need that I? Do you have a close third person? I'm just curious, because I didn't feel this book worked because of that, even though the story was kind of interesting, but he was boring. So, I was kind of left with, again, out $25.
I've written in both third person and first person. Actually, I had one short story in second person, but they all have their own challenges and their own delights. I mean, first person, you get that immediate connection with the reader, and we're all in this together, but you also only have their point of view. There's nothing else that you can, everybody else has to tell that person something if they don't see it or hear it
Right.
themselves. And third person, plot wise, it's certainly easier, but you have to get into that really deep third person point of view, and you have to do it with their dialogue and their inner dialogue, even if you've got sort of a narrator voice above it all. So they all have
I like that narrator voice. Narrator voice. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, we do the interpretive dance of how to write.
You lose it over the Golden Gate. So what do the rest of you think? Do you think,
Narrator.
I mean, do you think that point of view affects how the protagonist moves forward or moves sideways, or? What works, what doesn't? You think
Yeah,
it's just a personal thing for the writer, how it works?
you know what, sometimes if I'm, as far as my own writing, I always feel more comfortable with first person, but when I'm reading, if you would ask me later, if I really liked the book, what person was that, I wouldn't be able to tell you. You know, so when I get into a book that I'm reading, if I like it well enough, I don't even know what person was it.
Right,
I
right.
have to go and give it, oh, well, I better open that and see what they want. So I think if
Yeah,
either
I agree,
one
I
is
agree.
well done, then you don't, because close third is basically I mean,
Right, right, right.
a lot like that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I
You just
agree with
have
you.
to kind of live at the end if you're writing in I.
Now, how many people would remember that A Rose for Emily by Faulkner is written in first person plural?
What book was that,
Oh.
David?
Well, that's the short story, Rose for Emily. It's about the woman who, when she dies, they find that the body of her lover, she's been sleeping with it, basically every night. It's one of the best Southern Gothic
No, I don't.
beauty
It's
stories.
it's from the point of view of the town.
The community from the point of view of the
Yeah, which
much like the Virgin Suicide.
yeah,
So
it's exactly what I was gonna.
Oh, right, that one.
and it's now that you talk about a challenging point of view.
Yeah.
Suicides was another really good movie, actually, better than.
Well, I was just thinking of how, say brilliant To Kill a Mockingbird is, because that's from Scout's point of view. And yet you do not feel that it's a kid, and it works as a kid, but it's so much, it's also on a very different plane.
Well, it's a kid in reflection.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
Scout as she's older, reflecting back.
Yeah.
yeah.
But you do get a sense of her in the story as being.
Yeah, as a kid, yeah, kind of a rambunctious tomboy. We don't lose that. Do you think that you might write in a different gender? I've written in a different gender. It was kind of fun. Allowed me to be a little grittier. Have you guys thought about, is your angel a woman or a man, David?
Oh, he's a man. But my last novel, the Love Letters of Doc
Oh,
Holliday,
yeah.
it was a woman protagonist.
Huh.
Yeah.
And it's just, you just have to imagine what that person's life is like. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't think that I've ever had a problem in that regard, because I don't know. I didn't have any sisters, so I've always been kind of fascinated with women. So, and I just, I don't think it's hard to just, every human being has a certain perspective on their life. And if you just do the work of trying to figure out, well, who is this person? Where did she come from? So on and so forth. I think it's, I don't know. I enjoyed writing that book, and she had clearly some problems that a man wouldn't have had. But I didn't ever sit there and go, well, remember now, you're writing a woman. I mean, it just never, do you guys, have you ever had to worry about that?
A little bit. When I used to write romance, there were, because you kind of had to have both the female and male point of view.
Yes.
There were a few times where I would just go and say, would a guy do this? Would a guy say this? But what I found a lot of times is that if you asked a number of people, you got that many responses. There isn't a guy will do this, a woman will do that. You really did have to get into who that person was and why they would react that way.
I don't think I would do a whole book from a male protagonist, for example. I just wouldn't know how to do that. But a chapter here and there when you switch point of views in a longer book, that would work. But I would not personally. But I see how it would work in a romance, because you are also switching point of views, presumably, or you think you are. If it's right, if it's well written, you think you're getting each one. And I don't know, I wrote a couple that went nowhere, but what I thought was true about it is that it doesn't really matter what her point of view is or his. It's the relationship is the protagonist, in a sense, which makes it even more legitimate to head hop, as we might call it. Because what's important is the relationship. Now, I was never successful at a romance, so, you know, you can take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'm very anti-head hopping. It's one point of view per scene. Otherwise, I get too confused.
Yeah. Another Donald Moss truism. He does not believe that it's plot versus character. He believes that all novels are basically characterizations. I think that for me personally, the best books that I like are the ones where the plot feeds into the characterization and the characterization feeds into the plot. But I think in cozies, they tend to be more plot based. Do you agree with that or not?
No.
No.
I don't.
No.
Because the whole point is this person. It's this person in this situation. And so it always starts with who that person is and then how and the ones that I love best is the reason they're able to solve those mysteries is because of something intrinsic into who they are, what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like it always has to start with the character.
Do you agree,
Yeah.
Camille?
Yeah, I do. I have a mystery book club at my library, for example, and we do a rating. And I always have them rate 3 different criteria. So it's plot, character, and writing.
Mm.
Because what I found over the years is someone will say, oh, I'm giving this a 9. I love the writing. And then other people will say, but what a terrible plot. You know, how could you give it a 9? The plot was awful. And I finally sort of sifted through all that and say, okay, we're going to give 3 numbers in a sense, because I think people read for different things. For
Right.
some, they will bear a wonky plot if they like the character, or vice versa. If they don't like the character, the writing can be spectacular and they'll still give it a 3. And you know, these are obviously very arbitrary measures, the numbers that book club people give to novels, but it helps me anyway, writing is in the sense that, do I have all 3 of these going for me at this time? You know, does my character have the motivation to solve a crime? They can't come out of nowhere and solve a crime. It has to be something in it for them in the sense of their own need or their own motivation. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have one last question before we open it up for comments, questions. So do you see COVID affecting your characterization? Do you include it in future books or not?
I pass.
You pass.
Do a short story or something just to get it out. You know? The masks, people not wearing masks. I'm sorry if there's folks like you out there, but this is me. Oh, it drives me nuts. So maybe
Yeah.
some short story would be
Yeah.
cathartic.
I don't know. I'm writing a dystopian novel, and
Yeah.
it's like it's the story of the future. I mean, we're going to be, because of climate change and globalization, disease is going to be a major factor in the future.
Yeah.
It just is. And these novel corona, viruses are going to hit us over and over again.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you can't think of the future as some sort of antiseptic beyond. And but the thing is, how do you make that so it doesn't take over the book?
Yeah.
And the one thing I've got is that the real problem is that because the Bay Area now is like there's 2 seasons, fog and fire. And so the sky is almost always obscured, that especially poor kids are suffering from rickets, which they haven't had in forever, but they're just not getting any vitamin D.
Wow.
So the thing is, how do you get vitamin D? You get it from sheepskin. So where are you going to find a sheepskin in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Maybe on somebody's floor.
Yeah.
So, so I that's the only way that, for me, I mean, in my story, that's where it's going to come out. But it's, I mean, if you're writing a contemporary story and there isn't some element of that, I don't know. I mean, I don't think you need it absolutely, but boy, when it's clear, it's hit us like a sledgehammer.
Yeah, obviously. What about you, Eileen?
I always need a little time to reflect on things. Um, I was thinking about this. It's like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this yet. It's going to take a while for me to figure that out. I mean, the book that I'm working on right now, the characters are all empty nest moms. Their kids have just left for college. Well, my kids are 26 and 28. I've been an empty nester for a while, but it's taken me this long to figure out how I feel about it and how I resolve it and watch how other people deal with it. So I want to put it in a book.
Yeah.
So like 10 years from now, maybe I'll be able to do a COVID-19 novel.
Or just, well, I think David's point is that it doesn't have to be COVID, but sort of a sense of doom, you know,
Well, just vulnerability.
yeah, that there are forces out there that are bigger than we are. Yeah. About a little personal history is when I was visiting my daughter last October, right at this very moment, I was visiting my daughter in New Jersey, and Mark was home, and we had hurricane force winds basically, and it knocked down a power pole half a mile from our house and ignited the hillside, and he had to evacuate, and he didn't even know because he had changed phones and he didn't get the Nixle alert, and then a neighbor knocked on his door and said, dude, you better get out. And it, I mean, I work with earthquake engineers, so there's always that pending sense of earthquakes, but this was just, fire is so terrifying. And and I would like to put that in a book, just that sense of getting in the car and going. It doesn't have to be fire, or it doesn't have to be earthquakes, but where you just got to get in the car and you hope it, there's that half second where you turn the key and you hope the ignition clicks. You hope that you hear the engine. Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to open it up to questions, but I don't know how to open this up. So maybe Lori Squared, how do we open this up?
So we are out here, the voice from beyond. I have been, nice face, Eileen.
A little scary.
Maybe I'll just pop back in.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
This is Lori Sheehan.
Okay, so I'm not, these came in as you guys were talking. So some of them harken back to what you've already discussed this evening, but I'll just read them in order. So Mary Pyfinch has asked, have any of you written a standalone only to have fans or publishers demand that it be a series?
Camille.
Not yet. No, when I go from one series to another, usually the editor says, they never say, we're dumping you. They say, do you have any other ideas? So no, that's the direction most of my series have gone.
The urban fantasy series that I did, the first book in the series, I thought was a standalone. And my agent was the one who said, no, this isn't a standalone. Give me 2 more ideas to pitch with it.
I thought the first in my series was the one and only. I mean, I stuffed everything in there that I love to pieces and kind of wrapped it up, I thought, kind of nice. And
it was a beautiful book, Anne.
What's next? Oh.
David, do you see any of your characters coming back?
I did a novella with the Phelan Tierney, who's the protagonist of Mercy of the Night. And I thought I could maybe make him into a series character, but then I started writing him as the protagonist of Love Letters, the Love Letters of Doc Holliday. But then my agent said, well, could you make it a female protagonist? Because all I'm hearing from New York is they just want really strong female protagonists. That was 100 pages into the book, and I went, sure, I can do that. So, I mean, you call it, I haul it. So that's where Lisa Balamaro came from.
Yeah.
I just made a female protagonist. And
yeah, good question, Mary. So evidently the answer is yes. Sterling Cannell asked, do you have or do you write a biography for your protagonists or yourself before you begin a new story? If you did or do you find that worthwhile? So how do you know your characters, I guess?
I don't write an official biography, but I have to know like the arc of their life. I have to know where they're from and what their family was like and who they were as a kid. But I don't actually, I mean, it's pretty much just in my head. It's not on paper.
Are you all going to answer every question? No.
Claire, that's up to you. What do you want to do? Do you want to?
No, let's just keep moving on. If no
Okay.
one wants to chime in, that's fine.
No, I've written 2 books on this, so I gotta go. Yeah, I got to answer
Okay.
extensively. But
Okay, all right, David.
yeah, I mean, I don't write a biography. My whole thing about The Art of Character was I don't write a biography because that's information and it's flat and lifeless. What I look for, and Eileen sort of touches on this, I'm looking for key scenes in my character's past that were transformative, that changed the way they looked at themselves and their life. And the thing I look for in particular are moments of helplessness, moments when they were most frightened, or a moment where they were most ashamed, or a great loss, but also a great moment of triumph or joy or connection. And those, when I see those moments, I have a much, I don't need to know everything. I need to know these sort of these bright moments. And then as I write, if I need to figure out what the darkness is in between them, I'll discover that.
And so for those of you, sorry, Claire, to just sort of hijack you.
No, I'm fine with hijack.
So on that, when things happen, do you keep a character Bible though? So David and Eileen, if something tangible happens in your character's life that you're going to need to know for future novels, do you keep track of that though?
No, I completely forget it. You keep track of it. It's usually because it's in the previous book, and so I mean, you need to know that stuff, and if it helps you to write it down, that's fine.
David just remembers. I would have to write it down. Like I killed the same ant in every book, right? So she just keeps dying every time.
Oh damn.
I think that says something, Laura. I think that says something very profound. that maybe a therapist might help you with.
That's what I have Eileen for. So Michelle asks, I think it's a bit harder to have a pure traveling angel these days. Readers seem to really want the protagonist to have their own arc.
Reacher.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth matter, if you look at probably the two highest selling crime writers, Lee Child, Michael Connelly, completely different approaches to the hero. Bosch has more baggage than any one of us could bear in 1,000 lifetimes. And Reacher has virtually, we know a little bit about his past, and that's about it. And, we just know that when he sees a problem, he's going to hunt it down, and he's going to make whoever is at fault pay. I mean, that's pretty much it. They're like Popeye cartoons. He gets the snot kicked out of him for 2/3 of the story. And then he finally goes, that's all I can stand, and I can't stand no more. And he eats his spinach and he goes and kicks the shit out of Bluto. And that's pretty much a Reacher novel. And, but people love them. I mean, that they serve a different need. James Bond is a traveling angel, but the books he's much more interesting in the novels than he is in the films. And there's much more inner life to him. I mean, he's still a figure of the 50s, as it were. But you have a spectrum, is what I'm saying, and you can basically put your character anywhere you want on it, depending on what you want to accomplish with the books that you want to write.
I mean, I do think that someone like Harry Bosch, who is essentially a loner, it opens up more avenues for exploration, because you can start slotting people like Reacher, there's and Bond for that matter, where everything, where there's a new episode, new villain, new day, but basically the villains are pretty much all the same, world domination, and yet you can start slipping people in because he's an orphan, he's You know, he is in Istanbul one day, he's in Sao Paulo the next. So, you know, it's a character like that who has no ties. In some ways, is I'm not going to say is not moral, but there's nothing sort of tying him to this earth in some ways, although that's not so much true about Bosch, but certainly about Reacher. So it's I think it depends on what dilemma, and we didn't talk about this, but I think the issue of dilemma is really important in any book. What dilemma is your character facing? What dilemma does your protagonist have to solve? And I don't mean the crime, because the crime is sort of the MacGuffin in some ways. What I think every protagonist needs to solve something very personal by the end. And it doesn't for this, I think this is true for both standalones and series, that something has to happen to the protagonist by a moral choice, a mistake, a triumph. You know, you talked about this, David. You know, something needs to happen to the protagonist. And that's something that also seems to be a new trend where the protagonist is stagnant even, where very little happens to the protagonist. And I find these books very, very unsatisfying because I want something to happen to the protagonist. And it can be tragedy, it can be triumph, it can be many things, but there has to be an arc. And there doesn't seem to be arcs anymore. I don't quite understand it. Lots of beautiful language, but not a lot of arcs, in my opinion. So. Next question.
All right. The next question comes also from Mary Python. She says, what about a protagonist whose morality is questionable, an anti-hero? Do you keep people on his or her side for this type of protagonist? How do you keep people on his or her side? How do you keep people rooting for someone who's an anti-hero? I guess that goes a little bit back to Dexter, maybe.
Because they have reasons for what they're doing, and you make their reasons compelling. You know, maybe a few of us have done something not so great, which we thought was in the service of a greater good, told a lie to get something for someone, you know. It's human.
Yeah.
I always think of the difference between a hero with a flaw and an anti-hero. Is if a hero has a flaw, we normally expect within the story he's somehow going to have to deal with it. Whereas an anti-hero has a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. And in any given moment, he could go either way.
I agree, yeah.
And Breaking Bad is a great example of somebody, you know, who has has good and evil, and in every scene you wonder which. That's the tension in the character. That's the suspense. And also, if you're worried about, you know, how do you make an anti-hero likable? This is the way I always say. If you're ever worried about your character being likable, give them a kid or a dog, is what I say. Which just means let them care about somebody other than themselves. We are automatically drawn to a character who cares about somebody other than himself. And so if you're worried about it, if you think, oh man, this person's really, you know, kind of be reprehensible. Well, there's an easy fix. Give them someone else to be concerned about. And it's just a magic trick that we just automatically are on the side of somebody, as nefarious as they might be, if we see that they also have the capacity to care for someone else.
You know, there's also the save the cat moment is that what you said, Eileen?
No, but exactly. I think you hit it exactly.
But you know, that is the moment in the screenplay. It comes at about 5 minutes where the protagonist will save a cat. And even though people think I wouldn't save a cat, you know, I do appreciate someone who does that. And as long as you have that moment, anything else can happen, and people will be okay with it and do it.
Somebody walks into a bank, shoots everyone, walks out, goes down the street, saves a cat from the tree. You're like, oh, he's okay.
Not the best example, but you're kind of there.
You know, as we all know, it is Blake Snyder's theme and that whole franchise that he got out of that before he died. Writing the book, having all of the scripts and examples of it. So I didn't mean to throw that out as my own. That was Blake Snyder's franchise that did that. And I find that I remember having a seminar once where we all brought videos of just piles of movies on video. This is VHS, so you know how long that was, how long ago. And we just played so many different movies and stopped it at that moment. And there he is, Al Pacino is warning a little boy as he comes up the steps of the police station, ostensibly to get Yankees tickets, but really for his father to be arrested. And Al Pacino, the cop, looks at the boy and just does this. And we know that no matter what else he does after in that movie, he's our hero, or he's going to be okay and likable. So there are, you know, all these moments in so many different movies that are so different from each other. But that moment, the Save the Cat moment, establishes what we're going to think of that character from then on.
And they're good books for novelists too. I think Save the Cat Writes a Novel is another one of the books. So they're actually quite nice. Okay, there's one.
Save the Cat goes to the movies.
No, that's a newer one. The novel one is newer, and it's not written by Blake Snyder.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it is newer. Yeah.
So there's one more question we'll get to really quickly. How do you go about naming your characters? Have any of you ever named a character and changed it later because the character became someone that the name no longer fit? That's also from Sterling, who asked a question earlier.
Mhm.
Yeah. You know, that's something, I mean, it takes a while before you get the name where you kind of go, yeah, that's it. I'm dealing that with a secondary character in the book I'm writing right now. She's an Irish woman reporter. And I was listening to I'm sure all of you do this as well. It's like once you start writing a book, you just become a sponge, and everything you read and everything you hear, suddenly go, oh, I can use that. Oh, I can use that. And I was listening to a song by Lyle Lovett about Fiona, One-Eyed Fiona. And I kind of went, oh, I like that. I'll give her one eye. Call her Fiona. And that was it. So that was how I got Fiona. And but it's true. There's times when you may be like many pages into work and go, it just isn't working. I'm not feeling the character with this name. And you have to work until you get it right.
Well, and sometimes there's the practicality. If you end up with a lot of characters and realize that they're all starting,
Yeah.
and it's like, you may really want to name this character Catherine, but you're going to have to choose. Is it going to be Catherine, or are you going to give up Captain Crunch? You know?
Oh yeah. Well, that's why it's really good to make a list of your characters and kind of go up too many M's.
Yeah.
And because that can be death, and readers are going to, wait a minute, is it McCarthy or
Yep.
McCallum? I mean, which guy am I looking at? Yeah, that's a key point.
I have an Excel sheet, so I can sort by first name or last name.
Oh wow.
And I can look at them like this and go, all right, too many M's. Got to get rid of some M's here.
And Eileen and Camille, is that any different in the cozy world, or you get confused with too many?
No, I just keep the alphabet going, and I try not to have any two characters with the same initial. That is my really deep philosophical method of naming characters.
Kind of like hurricanes.
It is like hurricanes. But I have on occasion, I learned this lesson in the first book, where it's set in an Italian-American community where I grew up. You could also say a ghetto. And so I named all my characters after my high school friends, you know, because they had all the best names, Pietro Paolo, Trinilia, Guarino. So I named all of them after real people in my class. And then after I finished the novel, I thought, oh, you know, I was very naive writing the first one. As old as I was still naive. Someone said, you can't do that. You have to change those names. And so there I was with this entire host of characters, and I had to give them different names. That was a chore. I haven't done that. Even my main character, I had to change her names because it was my cousin. Anyway,
Your cousin might have been flattered by it.
well, I kept her first name, and she was happy about that.
Okay, okay.
Eileen, is that the same with you?
I think naming characters is really hard, and I don't probably go as deep into it. Well, certainly not as deep as David goes into it. I use a random name generator sometimes. I'll just sit there and click the button until I see something I like.
Too.
It's like,
Absolutely.
You know what I do? I will, depending on where the character's from, which part of the country, I will look at the rosters of like the football teams of like Louisiana, because you got a lot of Cajun names, Tex, because you got a lot of German and Irish names, Pennsylvania, because you got a lot of Polish names. It's just weird, but there's something about just getting a roster that isn't predictable. And even random name generator, I find it very often, the names are kind of bleh.
you have to ask for them to be not, you have to ask for them to be unusual, and sometimes you have to combine them.
But even
Yeah,
then, they
right.
sound a little contrived. Whereas, like, it's funny. I've had real luck with football teams,
The other
with women's names, of course. But
a good source is a Social Security Administration. If you have a character born in a certain year, you can go back to that year and get the most popular boys and girls names. And you may not want the most popular, but then you go way down the list. Instead of taking the top 5 that year, you take the 100th that year. But the SSA gives you all those popular babies' names for the year of their birth.
But I do think, I mean, this brings up an interesting point though, because I think there are certain names that are iconic for a certain set of years, right? I mean, it's like, and so if you have, I don't think there was certainly anybody in my daughter or my son's class at high school that was named Gertrude, or Mavis, or, sort of all these old fashioned names, which are, of course, so there is a particular, I think, eras associated with certain names, like Millie. My mother had several friends who were named Millie, but
Right.
I don't know a Millie. So,
But that is again where SSA comes in, because you know how old your character is. You figure out when she was born and go back to that.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
Claire,
should we
is
wrap it up and everybody can kind of,
Sounds good.
So, well, Laura King has asked me to do the very nice job tonight of thanking everyone for coming, also thanking Claire for being a fabulous moderator. The panelists are fabulous. And if anyone is out there in the audience still who would like to come on, turn on your camera, turn on your microphone. This will be the few minutes of what we'll refer to as the cocktail hour. So there were great comments. I think tonight might have been the busiest chat session that was rolling through. So a lot of people had comments for you and questions. We'll just spend a few minutes, let your friends pop in and say hi and tell you did a great job, and before we leave for the night. So thanks again to Camille and Anne and Eileen and David. You guys were fabulous. And Claire.
thank you very much, Eileen, for pinch hitting, and thank you guys for agreeing to be on my panel. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And
Camille?
Michelle and Mary, come on on.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Camille.
Hi.
I went to a one-day webinar, not webinar, but a class that you taught. We had it at the Hungry Hunter in Concord.
Wow.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I just enjoyed that class so much.
Thank you.
And I did. And I learned so much from it. And I just wanted to say thank you, because it just put me on the right track of what I wanted to
How
do.
nice of you. Thank you so
Yes.
much. You made my night.
You made my sort of my hobby going to career. Since I was a kid, I always said I was going to be a writer anyway, or an actor. So,
Thank you.
yes, thank you. And David, I have both your books on character.
Well, that was a waste of money. I'm sorry. Well, thank you.
I didn't think it was a waste of money. I found it very helpful. You know, I'm basically a screenwriter, but, you know, that's what I got my master's in. But I also like novels. So I have learned so much from taking classes on, you know, Sisters in Crime and then NWA. It's just helped so much with my other type of writing, which is screenwriting. So thank you.
No.
And if anybody wants an adaptation, let me know.
Mm,
Thanks.
ah,
I've really enjoyed this series. I think I've signed up for every day.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
so thank you all for taking the time to do this. I really
yes,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. Laurie, you're muted, by the way.
Thanks for letting me know. I do that sometimes.
Yes.
Hi, folks, my name is Sterling. I have a question. Besides David's 2 books on character, which I intend to order tonight, can any of you recommend writing craft books along this line about character in addition to David's books?
Lisa Crone.
Oh, yeah, I am reading her right now.
Does that mean Story Genius?
Pardon?
Yeah, she's got
Lisa
she's
Cron?
got 2.
The one I'm reading right now is Wired for Story.
There you go.
She's great.
Yeah, very helpful. And I found your advice tonight, David, very helpful also. Thank you.
You know, I have one more question, guys. I'm looking for books to read because I read a lot of books. And what would you guys recommend? I haven't read any of you, I'm sorry to say. But what books
Well,
would
I'd
you
start
recommend?
there.
That's a start. Yep, go right now. That's a good start.
I didn't, you know, I've been looking you guys up and I've been ordering, you know, books as I go. But anybody have like, what is their favorite book that they've written? Maybe I can start reading.
Always start with the latest. I don't know.
What's your latest, David?
The Long Lost Love Letters of Doc Holliday.
Oh, that sounds really cool because I lived in Tucson. And I actually got to go to Tombstone and I had an interesting time there.
I'll tell you, it takes place down there.
Yeah.
There's a modern story, and then the letters are sort of a subtext, different
You know,
secondary.
And what I found out is the tombstone that they tell everybody about is not really the one that is the true one. And I found that out by going on when I was just a teenager, I went with my mother on a tour that they did for the Veterans Administration. And that was very interesting that they have a fake cemetery tombstone and then real tombstone. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah,
I
just
definitely want to read that one.
Well, if you're interested in reading one of mine, I figure there's 2 entry places, depending. I mean, the first book in the series is the first book in the series, and that's Silver Lies. That's a good place. to
Okay.
start. I did write it like 20 years ago, so keep that in mind. And the first 5 books take place in Colorado in 1879, 1880. And then I started what I call the San Francisco cycle, and that would be A Dying Note. And there's like, there's 2 books. I just finished the 3rd in that cycle. So, you know, if you kind of tend toward one location or the other, and I always try to set each book up so if you come into it, it's the first book you pick up, you won't get too lost, you know.
Perfect. How about you, Eileen?
I have a new book coming out next month, so you could pre-order it.
Okay.
It's the first book in my Emptiness mystery series, and it's called Women of a Certain Rage.
Oh,
That sounds cool. Camille.
that's great.
I have a series that's just been reissued under my real name, so it would make it easier for you to find it. And it's a math professor. And first one is square root of murder.
Square root of murder.
Right.
I know what square root is, so I'm good there. Okay, thanks. Claire?
I've been playing with actually Jane Austen pastiches lately. And so the first one is called Pen and Prejudice. And the second one is called Resolution. And Resolution is I was pleased with it. So
I like Jane Austen.
yeah, they're very faithful to the real books, but they're modern day pastiches. So I had a lot of fun with it.
Okay. Thank you.
She's my hero.
Well, thank you, everyone. I have a reading list now, at least for next month.
There you go.
Well, and to just make things come full circle, since Mary's offered so much for us this evening to chat about, David, you mentioned your character has become Fiona, and Camille, you said that you're really not a cat fan, and Mary points out that she has a cat named Fiona.
Oh.
Named after
Oh,
Princess
boggle
Fiona
mind.
from
No.
Shrek.
Hopefully she doesn't have one eye.
No, she had both her eyes.
That's good.
She's
David, did
quite-
you really make her one-eyed?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and she's like 6 feet tall too. So that's, but she's sort of based on an Irish journalist that I know who does researches organized crime in Ireland.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
And
is she still alive?
no, she just came out with a book.
Oh, okay,
That's
good.
really excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
About a-
Fiona passed away a few years ago.
Oh,
Yeah, she was a tuxedo cat.
oh,
Great,
those
a
are
great
always fun.
cat. Yeah. But,
Camille's heartbroken.
yeah, I know. But Fiona's a good name. Like I said, I've done a lot of, I have a degree in anthropology. So, and I'm Irish. So my grandmother's been telling me stories about fairies since I was like 5 years old. So I have a couple of stories that delve into Celtic mythology. So
It's a huge
it's a
font
very
of
rich,
inspiration. Yeah, it is very rich.
mythology.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
take it so many places. So
yeah,
yeah.
I agree.
Hey, Peggy's coming on. Peg, can you,
Oh,
Oh,
can you
hey,
turn on
Peggy.
your camera and your microphone?
Where's Peggy?
Let me
I
see.
see her, but
Visible.
I unmuted her. Let's see if that works.
Peggy.
Camera, Peggy. Peggy, can you turn your camera on?
It's on as far as I know.
Do you have is there a cover over it on your computer?
No.
Oh, it's just black. That's crazy. Well, we can hear you though.
we
so
can hear
say-
you though. Yeah.
Well, hello, everybody. This was a great panel.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And thanks for putting up the SSA site, Peggy. I see you did that.
Yeah, that was good.
I love that site. I can spend more time just, procrastinating and wasting time on that site.
Oh, that, yes. So,
It's wonderful for naming trends, because one of the things that kind of drives me crazy with characters' names is when you've got a character who's been given a name